The explosion that rocked downtown Portland at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon gave Rebecca Chun exactly 90 seconds to evacuate a 12-story office building before the structural supports would fail catastrophically. What the panicked office workers streaming past her didn't know was that the calm woman directing their escape with surgical precision had once been responsible for clearing entire city blocks during classified demolition operations in places that didn't officially exist on any map. Rebecca was about to remind everyone that some skills never fade, no matter how deeply you try to bury them beneath layers of artisanal coffee and community service. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning ritual at Grind Coffee Collective began at 4:45 m sharp when Rebecca Chun unlocked the heavy glass doors of her cafe on Northwest Morrison Street. The pre-dawn darkness of Portland wrapped around the empty streets like a familiar blanket, and Rebecca moved through her opening routine with the kind of methodical precision that regular customers had come to associate with her exceptional attention to detail. At 34, Rebecca had owned the coffee shop for 3 years, transforming what had been a failing sandwich shop into the neighborhood's unofficial community center. Her petite frame and quiet demeanor masked an intensity that manifested in perfectly calibrated espresso shots, meticulously maintained equipment, and an uncanny ability to remember not just every customer's order, but their personal struggles, family updates, and professional achievements. The cafe itself reflected Rebecca's aesthetic sensibilities and practical mindset. Exposed brick walls featured rotating artwork from local artists, while reclaimed wood tables and vintage industrial fixtures created an atmosphere that felt both modern and timeless. What customers didn't notice was how the layout provided clear sight lines to all entrances, how the furniture could be quickly moved to create pathways, or how certain decorative elements concealed emergency supplies that most coffee shops would never need. Rebecca's morning preparation included tasks that seemed routine, but served dual purposes. Checking the building's structural elements disguised as cleaning became second nature. Testing emergency lighting systems appeared to be simple. Maintenance. Her systematic inspection of exits, stairwells, and utility access points looked like the thorough care of a responsible business owner, not the habitual security assessment of someone trained to evaluate buildings for tactical advantages and evacuation scenarios. The official records showed Rebecca as a former Army logistics coordinator who had used her VA benefits and personal savings to start a small business after completing her service. The paperwork was accurate but incomplete, failing to mention that her logistics coordination had involved moving personnel and equipment through hostile urban environments where miscalculation meant casualties, or that her discharge had come after a classified incident that officially never happened. Her first regular customer arrived at exactly 6 a.m. Thomas Brennan, a 62-year-old retired high school principal, ordered the same medium dark roast with a splash of cream that he'd requested every weekday for the past 2 years. Rebecca had his coffee ready before he reached the counter, a small gesture that Thomas attributed to exceptional customer service rather than the threat assessment and pattern recognition skills that made her hyper-aware of everyone's routines and behavioral changes. "Morning, Rebecca," Thomas said, settling into his usual spot by the window where he could watch the neighborhood wake up. "Looks like it's going to be another beautiful day in the Pacific Northwest." Rebecca smiled while steaming milk for the next customer's drink. Her ability to maintain casual conversation while simultaneously monitoring multiple variables, ambient noise levels, customer behavior patterns, building systems, street activity, had been developed during years of urban operations where situational awareness meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The breakfast rush brought a steady stream of familiar faces. Jennifer Walsh, a nurse at OHSU, grabbed her large iced coffee with an extra shot before her 12-hour shift. She always looked exhausted, but managed genuine warmth when chatting about her twin daughter's soccer season. Rebecca remembered every detail of their conversations, not from natural interest alone, but because cataloging personal information had been critical during intelligence operations where understanding civilian networks could reveal hidden threats or opportunities. Kevin Nakamura arrived at 7:30, laptop bag slung over his shoulder and the slightly frazzled expression of a software developer juggling multiple projects. He worked remotely for a tech startup and had claimed the corner table as his unofficial office, appreciating Rebecca's reliable Wi-Fi and her policy of never rushing customers who lingered over their drinks. What Kevin didn't realize was that Rebecca had positioned his preferred seating area to provide optimal visibility, while keeping him away from potential danger zones near the building's structural weak points. The morning crowd included Maria Santos, who managed the small marketing firm upstairs and had become something of a coffee connoisseur under Rebecca's patient guidance. Her enthusiasm for learning about different brewing methods and bean origins had created opportunities for Rebecca to share knowledge that seemed impressive but not impossible to explain. Her understanding of agricultural regions, supply chain, logistics, and quality control reflected professional competence rather than the comprehensive briefing she'd received about coffee producing. Regions where American interests required covert support. Rebecca's employees consisted of 2 part-time baristas who worked around their college schedules. Alex Rivera, studying environmental science at Portland State, handled afternoon shifts with enthusiasm that sometimes exceeded his technical skills. His passion for sustainable practices aligned with Rebecca's preference for ethical sourcing, though her knowledge of international agriculture came from operational experience rather than academic study. The evening shift belonged to Zoe Patterson, an art student whose creative energy had transformed the cafe's social media presence and attracted younger customers who appreciated her aesthetic sensibilities. Neither Alex nor Zoe knew anything about Rebecca's background beyond her standard explanation of military logistics work followed by business education. They saw her as a demanding but fair employer who possessed unusual expertise in areas ranging from equipment maintenance to crisis management. The building that housed Grind Coffee Collective was a converted warehouse that Rebecca had chosen after conducting what appeared to be routine due diligence, but was actually a comprehensive tactical assessment. The ground floor location provided multiple exit routes, while the building's solid construction and strategic position offered advantages that would be meaningless to most small business owners but critical to someone trained in urban operations. Rebecca's apartment occupied the building's second floor, accessible through a private entrance that most customers never noticed. The living space was spartanly furnished but strategically arranged, with clear sight lines to the street and reinforced entry points that appeared to be standard security measures. Neighbors who'd been invited up for coffee saw a tidy home that reflected practical sensibilities rather than the carefully concealed equipment and communication systems that would have been impossible to explain to civilian friends. The neighborhood itself had embraced Grind Coffee Collective as more than just a business. Local residents dropped by for informal meetings, students claimed tables for study sessions, and small business owners conducted casual networking over expertly crafted drinks. Rebecca had cultivated these relationships deliberately, understanding that community integration provided both cover and early warning systems that enhanced security while serving genuine social purposes. Her reputation for problem-solving had grown organically as customers sought advice about everything from lease negotiations to equipment recommendations. Rebecca's suggestions consistently proved valuable, earning trust that extended beyond coffee expertise. What people didn't realize was that her insights reflected experience with complex logistics, personnel management, and crisis planning developed during operations where failure meant more than disappointed customers. The financial success of the coffee shop provided legitimate income and plausible explanation for Rebecca's presence in the neighborhood. Her efficient operations and loyal customer base generated profit margins that satisfied both business requirements and the need for financial independence that allowed flexibility if circumstances required rapid departure. The books were clean, the taxes current, and the business model sustainable, all essential elements of a cover identity that could withstand scrutiny. 3 years of careful integration had created a life that felt both authentic and secure. Rebecca had successfully transitioned from classified operations to civilian community leadership, using skills developed for warfare in service of peaceful objectives that provided genuine satisfaction. The neighborhood had become her chosen community, and the daily rhythm of serving coffee and building relationships had replaced the adrenaline and uncertainty of covert missions standing behind her familiar counter as another morning rush subsided. Rebecca allowed herself a moment of satisfaction at what she'd built. The transition from her previous life had been more successful than she'd dared hope, proving that specialized training could be adapted to serve civilian purposes without losing its essential effectiveness. The peaceful existence she'd created seemed solid, sustainable, and worth protecting against any force that might threaten to disrupt it. The early autumn morning carried the crisp promise of changing seasons, and Rebecca prepared for another day of serving her community while maintaining the vigilant awareness that had kept her alive during 8 years of operations that officially never existed. Her secret remained safely buried beneath layers of civilian normalcy, and she had every reason to believe it would stay that way. But some mornings, the universe has different plans for people who've spent their lives preparing for the unexpected. First sign that Rebecca Chun possessed capabilities beyond coffee brewing appeared on a rainy Thursday morning when the building's century-old heating system failed during Portland's worst cold snap in 5 years. While other business owners on the block were closing early and sending employees home, Rebecca had the problem diagnosed, temporary solutions implemented, and backup heating systems operational within 40 minutes. Her methodical approach to the crisis impressed everyone who witnessed it. She'd traced the problem through the building's infrastructure with the systematic precision of someone who understood complex mechanical systems, identified multiple failure points that most people wouldn't have noticed, and coordinated repairs with a calm efficiency that seemed almost supernatural to customers who'd expected to spend their morning shivering over lukewarm coffee. "I've never seen anyone troubleshoot building systems like that," remarked Dr. Helen Chang, a structural engineer who frequented the cafe before her commute to the university. "You approached it like someone with formal training in mechanical engineering or industrial maintenance. Where did you learn to read building schematics so quickly?" Rebecca's explanation about military experience with logistics and facility management was plausible, but somehow insufficient to account for the sophistication of her diagnostic methods. The way she'd identified load-bearing elements, traced utility pathways, and calculated stress factors suggested knowledge that went beyond basic maintenance training into specialized technical expertise. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The heating crisis became neighborhood legend within days, with local business owners seeking Rebecca's advice about their own infrastructure problems. Her recommendations consistently proved accurate and cost-effective, earning her recognition as someone who understood buildings and mechanical systems with unusual depth and precision. Marcus Webb, who owned the vintage bookstore 2 blocks away, brought his electrical problems to Rebecca after his regular contractor had failed to identify intermittent power failures that were disrupting his business operations. Rebecca's diagnosis was immediate and comprehensive, revealing wiring issues that posed serious fire hazards and recommending solutions that addressed both immediate problems and long-term safety concerns. "She walked through my building for 15 minutes and identified problems that 3 different electricians had missed. Marcus told his customers with obvious amazement. Her analysis was more thorough than the professional inspections I'd paid for, and her recommendations saved me thousands of dollars in potential damage. The consistency of Rebecca's technical insights began attracting attention from professionals who recognized expertise that exceeded what military logistics training would typically provide. Her knowledge of structural engineering, electrical systems, plumbing infrastructure, and building codes reflected comprehensive understanding that seemed disproportionate to her official background. Jennifer Walsh, the nurse who'd become one of Rebecca's most devoted regular customers, started noticing other unusual aspects of her behavior during their morning conversations. Rebecca's questions about Jennifer's work at the hospital demonstrated understanding of medical emergency procedures, trauma response protocols, and crisis management techniques that suggested more than casual curiosity about healthcare. She asks about triage procedures and mass casualty protocols like someone with medical training, Jennifer confided to her husband during dinner. Yesterday she wanted to know about evacuation procedures for different types of emergencies. When I asked why she was interested, she said it was for business preparedness, but her questions were too specific and informed for general planning. Rebecca's medical knowledge became apparent during a weekend incident when elderly customer Harold Morrison collapsed at the cafe's entrance. While other customers panicked and fumbled with their phones, Rebecca had immediately assessed his condition, positioned him properly to maintain airway clearance, and begun coordinated care that stabilized his vital signs before paramedics arrived. Her medical intervention was flawless and professional, demonstrating training that went far beyond basic first aid certification. She'd recognized symptoms of cardiac distress, implemented appropriate emergency response, and communicated with medical personnel using terminology that impressed the EMTs who responded to the call. Your initial assessment and stabilization probably saved his life, paramedic Lisa Rodriguez told Rebecca after Harold had been transported to the hospital. Your response was textbook perfect, better than some trained medical professionals I've worked with. Have you considered a career in emergency medicine? The medical emergency established Rebecca's reputation for crisis competence while raising questions about how someone with her official background had acquired such sophisticated clinical skills. Customers began viewing her as someone who could handle any situation that arose, creating expectations that would prove significant when circumstances eventually tested the limits of her hidden capabilities. Kevin Nakamura, whose software development work had made him analytically observant about systems and processes, began documenting instances where Rebecca demonstrated knowledge that seemed inconsistent with her stated background. Her comments about cybersecurity, network infrastructure, and digital communications revealed understanding of technical concepts that most small business owners wouldn't possess. She helped me troubleshoot a VPN connectivity issue that had been frustrating me for weeks, Kevin mentioned to Alex during an afternoon shift. Her suggestions about network protocols and security configurations were more sophisticated than what I'd expect from someone without formal IT training. When I asked where she'd learned about network architecture, she mentioned military computer systems, but her knowledge seemed more current and specialized than basic military IT would provide. Rebecca's technical competencies extended into areas that individually seemed explainable, but collectively suggested expertise far beyond her official military service record. Her understanding of construction materials, architectural principles, and building safety codes impressed contractors who sought her advice about renovation projects. When the small marketing firm upstairs experienced structural concerns about water damage, Rebecca's assessment of the problem was more comprehensive than the professional inspection they'd commissioned. She'd identified moisture infiltration patterns, evaluated potential mold hazards, and recommended remediation strategies that addressed both immediate repairs and long-term prevention. She knows more about building science than most contractors. I've worked with, admitted Tony Castillo, the construction supervisor who'd been hired to address the water damage. Her analysis of moisture dynamics and structural integrity was spot on, and her recommendations prevented what could have been a much more expensive problem. The accumulation of technical demonstrations created growing recognition that Rebecca possessed diverse capabilities that didn't quite fit together into a coherent explanation. Customers who'd witnessed different aspects of her expertise began comparing notes and discovering that her knowledge base was broader and deeper than anyone had initially realized. Maria Santos had become fascinated by Rebecca's ability to provide detailed information about international trade, agricultural economics, and global supply chain management during their conversations about coffee sourcing. Her insights into political stability, transportation infrastructure, and economic development in coffee-producing regions demonstrated knowledge that seemed to reflect personal experience rather than academic study. She talks about Central American agriculture like someone who spent time in the field, Maria observed to Thomas during one of their regular morning conversations. Her comments about regional politics and economic conditions are more detailed and current than what you'd get from trade publications. When I asked about her international experience, she mentioned military deployment support, but her knowledge seems too specialized for general logistics work. Rebecca's international expertise became more apparent during a community discussion about fair trade certification and ethical sourcing practices. Her explanations of political situations, agricultural challenges, and economic pressures facing coffee farmers reflected an understanding that went beyond business research into what seemed like first-hand operational knowledge of complex international environments. The depth of her geopolitical awareness impressed Dr. Patricia Hoffman, a political science professor who'd started frequenting the cafe after discovering Rebecca's exceptional coffee and engaging conversation. Their discussions about international relations revealed analytical capabilities and regional expertise that seemed inconsistent with someone whose military service had been limited to domestic logistics coordination. Her understanding of Latin American politics and economic development is remarkably sophisticated, Dr. Hoffman mentioned to her colleagues during a faculty meeting. She analyzes regional stability and security concerns like someone with professional intelligence training, rather than general business interest in coffee markets. Rebecca's language capabilities added another layer to the growing recognition of her unusual qualifications. Customers occasionally overheard her conducting phone conversations in Spanish, Portuguese, and what sounded like Arabic, always with the fluency of someone who'd used these languages professionally rather than learned them academically. When a group of international students from Portland State began frequenting the cafe, Rebecca's ability to communicate comfortably in their native languages created connections that impressed both the students and other customers who witnessed these interactions. Her cultural knowledge and linguistic competence suggested international experience that extended beyond typical military deployment. She speaks Spanish like someone who's lived in South America, observed Carlos Mendez, a graduate student from Colombia who'd become a regular customer. Her accent and cultural references are specific to regions where most Americans never travel. When I asked about her international experience, she was vague about details but clearly has spent significant time in Latin America. There's been more foot traffic from people who don't seem like typical customers, Thomas observed while sipping his usual dark roast. Yesterday, someone asked detailed questions about your business hours and whether you live upstairs. I told him you were a private person who kept regular hours, but his interest seemed more professional than casual. The revelation that surveillance had extended to questioning her customers created immediate concern for the safety of innocent people who'd become unwitting participants in whatever operation was being planned. Rebecca's military oath to protect civilians meant that any threat to her community took priority over her. Personal security. Jennifer Walsh arrived for her morning coffee with information that confirmed Rebecca's worst fears about the scope of the intelligence operation. During her hospital shift, she'd encountered individuals claiming to be conducting background checks for insurance purposes, asking detailed questions about Rebecca's medical knowledge and emergency response capabilities. They knew about the incident with Harold Morrison, Jennifer reported quietly. Their questions were too specific and informed to be routine insurance verification. They asked about your medical training, crisis management skills, and whether you'd ever mentioned military medical experience. I told them I only knew you as a coffee shop owner, but they seemed to already know more than they were revealing. The insurance investigators were clearly the same individuals conducting surveillance, using legitimate-seeming cover stories to gather intelligence from Rebecca's personal and professional contacts. Their knowledge of specific incidents and capabilities indicated comprehensive background investigation that had penetrated her cover identity. Kevin Nakamura's afternoon laptop session was interrupted by his observation of technical surveillance being conducted from the building across the street. His software development background had made him naturally observant about electronic equipment, and he'd identified sophisticated monitoring gear that seemed inconsistent with the commercial space where it was positioned. There's definitely electronic surveillance being conducted from the office building, Kevin reported to Rebecca during a quiet moment between customers. I can see directional antennas and what looks like signal interception equipment positioned to monitor this area. The setup is more professional than anything local law enforcement would typically use for routine investigations. The confirmation of electronic surveillance meant that Rebecca's communications, customer interactions, and possibly even private conversations were being monitored by individuals with significant technical capabilities. Her operational security had been completely compromised, leaving her unable to communicate safely or plan defensive measures without alerting hostile forces. Maria Santos brought additional intelligence about the surveillance operation when she reported that her marketing firm had been contacted by individuals claiming to represent potential clients interested in the building's commercial spaces. Their questions about tenant activities, security measures, and building access suggested reconnaissance rather than legitimate business interest. They asked specifically about your cafe and whether you had any special security arrangements. Maria explained. When I mentioned that you seemed very security conscious, they wanted details about what measures you'd implemented. Their interest was too focused to be a casual commercial inquiry. The pattern of intelligence gathering confirmed that Rebecca was facing a coordinated operation involving multiple agencies or organizations with substantial resources. The scope and sophistication of their activities indicated government-level capabilities, but their objectives remained unclear. Rebecca's assessment of the tactical situation revealed that she was dealing with professionals who understood her background and capabilities well enough to plan comprehensive surveillance and intelligence gathering. Their patience and methodical approach suggested long-term operational planning rather than immediate action, but the thoroughness of their preparation indicated serious intent. The evening brought a critical development when Officer Jamie Torres made an unofficial visit to warn Rebecca about federal inquiries into her background and activities. Torres's professional relationship with Rebecca had earned her respect within the local police department, making her willing to provide advance warning about potential problems. Federal agents have been asking questions about you, Torres reported quietly. They're not sharing details about their investigation, but they've requested information about your community activities, customer relationships, and any unusual incidents involving your business. The inquiries suggest you're part of an active federal investigation. The federal interest confirmed that Rebecca's situation involved more than private surveillance or criminal investigation. Government agencies were actively investigating her background and current activities, suggesting that her military service record had been flagged for reasons that posed potential threats to her. Civilian identity. Torres's warning created an opportunity for Rebecca to gather intelligence about the scope of federal involvement while maintaining her cover identity. Her questions about the nature of the inquiries revealed that multiple agencies were coordinating their investigation, indicating a complex situation that extended beyond routine background verification. The realization that federal authorities were investigating her civilian identity while unknown individuals conducted sophisticated surveillance created a tactical problem that required immediate decision-making. Rebecca's options were limited by the need to protect innocent civilians while maintaining operational security that prevented further compromise of her position. Alex Rivera's evening shift brought news that confirmed the escalation of surveillance activities. His environmental science background had made him observant about changes in the neighborhood's daily patterns, and he'd noticed increased vehicle traffic and unfamiliar individuals, conducting what appeared to be systematic area reconnaissance. "There's definitely more activity around the building," Alex reported while closing the cafe. "I've seen the same vehicles parked in different locations over the past few days. And there are people who seem to be watching the building rather than conducting normal business. Should I be concerned about security?" Rebecca's response balanced the need to alert her employees about potential dangers while avoiding panic that could complicate an already challenging situation. Her protective instincts demanded that Alex and Zoe be prepared for possible threats, but revealing too much information could endanger them further. The night brought additional confirmation of the surveillance operations scope when Rebecca identified individuals conducting technical reconnaissance of her building's communications and utility systems. Their activities suggested preparation for either electronic interception or physical intervention, indicating that the intelligence gathering phase was transitioning toward operational implementation. Rebecca's analysis of the surveillance pattern revealed that the operation against her involved significant resources and long-term planning. The coordination between different surveillance teams, the sophistication of their technical capabilities, and the extent of their background investigation indicated government or military involvement at high levels. The decision to remain in her civilian identity while preparing defensive measures reflected Rebecca's commitment to the community she'd built and her determination to protect innocent people who'd become targets simply by association with her. But the escalating surveillance made it clear that her peaceful existence was about to face challenges that would test every skill she'd developed during 8 years of classified military service. Standing alone in her darkened cafe while professional operatives maintained observation positions throughout the neighborhood, Rebecca began mental preparation for scenarios she'd hoped never to face again. The quiet life she'd built over 3 years was about to collide with forces that possessed both the authority and capability to destroy everything she'd worked to create. The next morning would bring decisions that would determine whether her hidden capabilities could protect both herself and the innocent people who'd become part of her chosen community. The surveillance operation had reached a level of intensity that suggested immediate action was imminent, and Rebecca's window for peaceful resolution was rapidly closing. Her 3 years of careful integration into civilian life had created relationships and responsibilities that she couldn't abandon without devastating consequences for people who trusted her leadership and protection. The skills that had once been used for warfare would soon be tested in defense of the peaceful community she'd fought to build and preserve. The transformation from neighborhood coffee shop owner to operational readiness was beginning, whether Rebecca was prepared for it or not. The forces that had been gathering in the shadows were about to emerge into the light, and her response would determine the fate of everyone she'd learned to care about during her brief experiment with normal life. Tomorrow would test whether 3 years of community building had been preparation for the greatest mission of her career, or simply a peaceful interlude before returning to the dangerous world she'd never really left behind. The escalation began at 3:47 a.m., when Rebecca's perimeter alarms detected unauthorized entry into the building's basement utility areas. The intrusion wasn't random. Someone with technical expertise had bypassed standard security measures to access infrastructure systems that controlled power, communications, and structural monitoring throughout the building. Rebecca's immediate response was to activate protocols she'd installed during her first month of ownership, but had never expected to use. Hidden cameras revealed two individuals in tactical gear conducting systematic reconnaissance of electrical panels, water systems, and structural support elements. Their professional movement patterns and specialized equipment confirmed that her building was being prepared for either complete surveillance penetration or controlled demolition. The basement intrusion team worked with precision that indicated extensive planning and detailed knowledge of the building's layout. They installed monitoring devices in locations that would be invisible to routine inspection while providing comprehensive surveillance of every system that kept the structure operational. Their modifications to utility controls created remote access capabilities that could disable power, water, or communications on command. Rebecca's decision to observe rather than confront the intrusion team reflected tactical assessment that direct engagement would escalate the situation beyond her ability to control outcomes. Her priority was gathering intelligence about their capabilities and objectives, while maintaining the element of surprise that might prove crucial when circumstances forced her to respond with lethal force. The technical sophistication of the basement operation confirmed that she was facing government-level resources and planning. The equipment being installed exceeded anything available to criminal organizations, while the team's coordination and security measures indicated military or intelligence agency involvement at the highest classification levels. At 5:15 a.m., the intrusion team completed their work and departed through the same access routes they'd used for entry, leaving no trace of their presence except for the surveillance modifications that would now monitor Rebecca's every movement and conversation. Her building had been transformed into a comprehensive intelligence collection facility without her civilian community having any awareness of the penetration. Rebecca's morning routine proceeded normally while she mentally cataloged the surveillance capabilities that had been installed overnight. Every electrical device, water fixture, and structural element now served dual purposes as both functional building systems and intelligence gathering tools. Her conversations, customer interactions, and personal activities would all be monitored and analyzed by individuals whose objectives remained unclear. The breakfast rush brought familiar faces whose presence now created additional security concerns for Rebecca. Thomas Brennan's morning visit occurred under complete surveillance that would document his relationship with Rebecca and potentially identify him as either an intelligence asset or a target for leverage. His routine conversation about weather and neighborhood news was being recorded and analyzed by professionals who might view his friendship as either opportunity or threat. "Beautiful morning," Thomas commented while settling into his window seat with his usual coffee. "Though I noticed some utility work being done very early. Must have been emergency repairs to have crews working before dawn." Rebecca's response acknowledged his observation while avoiding details that might alert surveillance monitors to her awareness of the overnight intrusion. Her ability to maintain casual conversation while knowing that every word was being recorded and analyzed required operational discipline that civilian business owners wouldn't possess. Jennifer Walsh arrived with information that revealed the extent to which her personal life had been penetrated by the surveillance operation. Hospital administrators had contacted her about updated background checks for staff members who frequented establishments owned by individuals under federal investigation. The bureaucratic language couldn't disguise the fact that her friendship with Rebecca had created professional complications. "They're not requiring me to stop coming here," Jennifer explained quietly, "but they want detailed reports about any unusual activities or conversations. I told them this was just my regular coffee shop, but they seemed to know more about our friendship than routine background checks would typically reveal. The pressure being applied to Jennifer demonstrated how thoroughly Rebecca's community relationships had been mapped and analyzed. Federal authorities were using her civilian connections as sources of intelligence, while creating leverage that could force cooperation or compliance when circumstances required more direct intervention. Kevin Nakamura's technical expertise had identified additional electronic surveillance that hadn't been present the previous day. His software development background allowed him to recognize signal interception equipment, network monitoring devices, and communication jammers that had been positioned throughout the commercial district. The scope of electronic warfare capabilities indicated preparation for operations that extended far beyond simple surveillance. The entire block is now under comprehensive electronic monitoring, Kevin reported during a brief conversation that appeared casual to surveillance observers. Whatever investigation is being conducted has military-level technical support. The communication interception capabilities suggest preparation for isolating this area from outside contact if necessary. Rebecca's realization that her entire neighborhood had become a controlled environment created immediate concerns for civilian safety and community protection. The electronic warfare preparations indicated that authorities were planning scenarios that might require communication blackouts, emergency isolation, or population control measures that would endanger innocent people. Maria Santos brought intelligence about the expansion of surveillance activities to include the entire commercial building. Federal agents had approached the building's owner about installing additional security measures that would provide enhanced monitoring capabilities throughout all tenant spaces. The landlord's cooperation had been secured through a combination of legal authority and financial incentives that made resistance impractical. They're upgrading the building's entire security infrastructure, Maria explained. New cameras, access controls, and what they described as environmental monitoring systems that will track everything from temperature changes to air quality. The scope of the installation suggests they're preparing for long-term, comprehensive surveillance of all activities in the building. The building-wide surveillance upgrade meant that Rebecca's cafe would be monitored continuously from multiple systems that she couldn't disable or avoid. Every customer interaction, employee conversation, and business activity would be documented and analyzed by individuals who possessed complete authority to use that information for any purpose they deemed necessary. Dr. Helen Chang's afternoon visit brought professional analysis of the surveillance capabilities that had been installed throughout the neighborhood. Her structural engineering expertise allowed her to recognize the technical sophistication of monitoring systems that exceeded standard security measures. The modifications to building infrastructure suggested preparation for scenarios that went beyond routine law enforcement activities. The electronic systems being installed are more sophisticated than what most government buildings use for security, Dr. Chang observed. The power requirements, signal processing capabilities, and network infrastructure suggest preparation for complex operations that would require real-time monitoring and control of multiple variables simultaneously. Rebecca's conversation with Dr. Chang provided cover for gathering technical intelligence about the surveillance operation while maintaining her civilian persona. Her questions about building modifications and security upgrades appeared to reflect normal business owner concerns rather than professional counter-surveillance assessment. The afternoon brought a critical development when Alex Rivera reported direct contact with individuals claiming to be federal agents investigating Rebecca's background and activities. Their approach had been professional but intimidating, using official credentials and legal authority to secure his cooperation in providing information about his employer's behavior and capabilities. They showed me official identification and said they were conducting a national security investigation, Alex reported nervously. They asked detailed questions about your technical knowledge, crisis management skills, and whether you'd ever mention military experience beyond general logistics work. They want me to report any unusual activities or conversations. The federal pressure on Alex created a direct threat to operational security, while forcing Rebecca to consider how much information she could share with employees who were being used as intelligence sources. His genuine loyalty and concern for her welfare conflicted with official pressure that could result in legal consequences if he refused to cooperate. Rebecca's response to Alex's situation required a delicate balance between protecting him from federal retaliation and maintaining security protocols that prevented further compromise of her position. Her explanation of the situation acknowledged federal interest while avoiding details that could endanger him or provide additional intelligence to surveillance monitors. The evening shift brought Zoe Patterson with confirmation that the surveillance operation had expanded to include comprehensive background investigations of everyone associated with Rebecca's business and personal activities. Art school administrators had contacted her about federal inquiries into her employment history and her relationship with individuals under government investigation. "They're not telling me to quit working here," Zoe explained, "but they want regular reports about anything unusual that might happen at the cafe." The questions they asked suggested they already know more about your background than you've ever told us. "Are you in some kind of trouble that we should know about?" The direct question from Zoe forced Rebecca to make immediate decisions about how much truth she could reveal without endangering her employees or compromising whatever operational security remained. Her response needed to provide sufficient information to ensure their safety while avoiding details that could be used against her by surveillance monitors. Officer Torres's evening patrol brought unofficial intelligence about the scope of federal activities in the neighborhood. Multiple agencies were coordinating their operations through a command center that had been established in a nearby office building, suggesting a major investigation or operational planning that extended far beyond routine background verification. "There's definitely something big being planned," Torres reported quietly. "The federal presence has increased significantly over the past few days, and they're requesting detailed information about all residents and businesses in this area. The scope of their activities suggests they're preparing for some kind of major operation." The confirmation of federal command center establishment meant that Rebecca's situation had escalated to the level of major government operation involving significant resources and high-level authorization. The agencies involved possessed both legal authority and operational capabilities that could overwhelm any defensive measures she might implement. Rebecca's tactical assessment of the situation revealed that she was facing a coordinated government operation with comprehensive surveillance, electronic warfare capabilities, and legal authority that made resistance extremely dangerous for both herself and her civilian community. The escalation from simple investigation to operational preparation suggested that circumstances were approaching a critical decision point. The building's transformation into a surveillance facility had eliminated Rebecca's ability to plan defensive measures or communicate securely with outside resources. Her every movement and conversation was being monitored by professionals who possessed complete intelligence about her background, capabilities, and civilian relationships. Standing in her cafe after closing while knowing that sophisticated surveillance systems were documenting her every action, Rebecca faced the reality that her 3 years of peaceful civilian life were about to end in ways that would test every skill she'd developed during classified military service. The community she'd built and the people she'd learned to care about were now part of a government operation whose objectives remained unclear, but whose capabilities posed existential threats to everything she'd worked to protect. The transformation from neighborhood coffee shop owner to target of major federal operation was nearly complete. Tomorrow would bring decisions that would determine whether her hidden expertise could protect her civilian community or whether the forces arrayed against her possessed resources that exceeded her individual capabilities. The surveillance operation had reached the level of intensity that preceded direct action, and Rebecca's window for peaceful resolution had closed entirely. Her next choices would be made under conditions of complete enemy observation, with the lives of innocent people dependent on capabilities that officially didn't exist, and training that had never been intended for use against her own government. Crisis that would expose Rebecca Chun's true identity erupted at exactly 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday when the building's fire alarm system activated with the distinctive pattern that indicated not malfunction, but imminent structural collapse. Through the cafe's windows, Rebecca could see smoke billowing from the 12-story Cascade office tower across the street, where an explosion had just ripped through the building's foundation supports, with the panicking office workers pouring onto Morrison Street. Didn't know was that the structural damage assessment Rebecca was conducting from her cafe counter indicated they had exactly 90 seconds before progressive collapse would bring down the entire building with over 300 people still trapped inside. The explosion had been no accident. Rebecca's trained eye immediately identified the blast pattern and debris field that indicated precisely placed charges designed to create maximum structural instability while providing minimal escape time. Someone had turned the office building into an engineered death trap, and only she possessed the expertise to prevent a catastrophic loss of life. Everyone needs to evacuate the Cascade building immediately, Rebecca shouted to the crowd gathering on the street, but her voice was lost in the chaos of screaming civilians and approaching sirens. The first responders arriving on scene were following standard evacuation protocols that would take at least 5 minutes to implement, 4 minutes longer than the building had before total collapse. Rebecca's military training had included extensive work with controlled demolitions and structural failure analysis. She could see that the support columns on floors 3 through 7 had been compromised in a sequence designed to create progressive failure that would bring down the upper floors in a controlled pancake collapse. The engineering was sophisticated and deadly, the work of someone with advanced knowledge of both demolition techniques and building construction. Federal Agent Morrison emerged from the surveillance van that had been monitoring Rebecca's activities, his expression grim with the recognition that civilian lives now depended on capabilities that only she possessed. "Captain Chun," he called out, using her former military rank for the first time in public. "We need your expertise immediately. The building has been rigged with a delayed collapse sequence, and standard evacuation procedures won't save the people still inside." The federal acknowledgement of her military background in front of her entire community marked the end of Rebecca's civilian cover identity. Thomas Brennan, Jennifer Walsh, Kevin Nakamura, and dozens of other customers who had gathered to watch the emergency response now stared at her with shocked recognition that their neighborhood coffee shop owner was someone entirely different from who they'd believed her to be. "Your military?" Jennifer whispered, her medical training helping her process the implications faster than others. "This isn't random, is it? Someone targeted this building specifically because they knew you were here." Rebecca's response was immediate action rather than explanation. She sprinted toward the Cascade building while mentally calculating structural failure timelines and evacuation routes that could save the maximum number of lives. Her analysis of the blast damage and building sway patterns indicated that the north stairwell remained structurally sound, but only for approximately 80 more seconds. "North stairwell only," Rebecca shouted to the firefighters, establishing their command post. "Floors 8 through 12 have maybe 1 minute before the support columns fail completely. South and east stairwells are compromised. Anyone using those routes will be trapped when the building comes down." Fire Chief Martinez recognized the authority in Rebecca's voice and the precision of her structural assessment. "How do you know the building's failure pattern?" he demanded. "Are you an engineer?" "Demolition specialist, former military," Rebecca replied while studying the building's tilt and calculating the optimal positioning for emergency personnel. Whoever set these charges knew exactly how to create maximum casualties with minimal escape time. This is a professional job designed to kill everyone inside. The revelation of Rebecca's explosive expertise shocked the emergency responders and civilian observers who had never suspected that their quiet coffee shop owner possessed knowledge of military demolitions and structural engineering. Her transformation from neighborhood business owner to tactical expert was complete and irreversible. Kevin Nakamura, whose analytical mind was processing the situation with software developer precision, understood the implications immediately. The surveillance operation, the federal agents, the questions about your background, this whole thing was planned to force you into action, wasn't it? Someone wanted to expose your capabilities. Rebecca's confirmation came in the form of continued action as she directed emergency personnel toward the single evacuation route that offered survival chances while coordinating with firefighters who were struggling to establish effective rescue operations. Her commands carried the authority of someone accustomed to life and death decision-making under extreme pressure. 60 seconds remaining, Rebecca announced, her voice cutting through the chaos with military precision. Anyone still inside needs to use the north stairwell immediately. The building's foundation is failing in sequence. There won't be time for multiple evacuation attempts. Agent Morrison approached Rebecca with information that confirmed her suspicions about the attack's true purpose. Intelligence indicates this explosion was designed specifically to force you into revealing your capabilities, he reported. Someone wanted to demonstrate your demolition expertise to eliminate any doubt about your military background and specializations. The tactical situation was evolving beyond simple building collapse as Rebecca identified additional structural instabilities that suggested the explosion had been part of a larger operation. Her expertise in controlled demolitions allowed her to recognize that the Cascade building collapse was designed to create debris patterns that would damage surrounding buildings, including her own cafe. This isn't just about the office building, Rebecca told Chief Martinez while pointing to stress fractures appearing in nearby structures. The blast was calculated to create a domino effect that will bring down multiple buildings unless we can redirect the collapse pattern. We need to evacuate a 3-block radius immediately. The expanded evacuation order required Rebecca to coordinate with multiple emergency agencies while using expertise that civilian first responders didn't possess. Her ability to predict structural failure patterns and calculate debris trajectories demonstrated training that went far beyond basic military engineering into specialized demolitions work that few individuals had ever received. Dr. Helen Chang, who had been having coffee in Rebecca's cafe when the explosion occurred, was now witnessing professional demolitions analysis that exceeded her own structural engineering expertise. Your understanding of controlled collapse sequences is more sophisticated than anything I learned in graduate school, she observed. This is advanced military demolitions training, isn't it? Rebecca's response was interrupted by the sound of secondary explosions from within the Cascade building, charges that had been timed to accelerate the collapse sequence and eliminate any possibility of extended evacuation. Her immediate recognition of the explosive pattern confirmed that she was dealing with someone who possessed the same specialized training she had received during classified military service. Professional demolitions work, Rebecca announced. Grimly, multiple charges timed to create progressive failure. Whoever did this has advanced military training and access to restricted explosives. This is a government-level operation. The final 30 seconds before building collapse became a desperate race to clear the evacuation zone, while Rebecca coordinated emergency response efforts that required split-second timing and perfect execution. Her demonstration of tactical leadership under extreme pressure revealed capabilities that her civilian community had never suspected existed beneath the surface of their friendly neighborhood coffee shop owner. When the Cascade building finally collapsed in a thunderous cascade of concrete and steel, Rebecca's evacuation coordination had saved over 200 lives that would have been lost to standard emergency response procedures. Her expertise in structural failure analysis and controlled demolitions had been the difference between a tragic accident and a mass casualty disaster. Standing amid the debris and dust while emergency personnel continued rescue operations, Rebecca faced the reality that her 3 years of civilian life had ended permanently. Her military capabilities had been exposed to her entire community, federal authorities, and whoever had orchestrated the attack to force her revelation. The explosion and building collapse had been designed not just to cause casualties, but to destroy her cover identity and eliminate her ability to maintain the peaceful existence she'd built. Someone with knowledge of her background and current life had used innocent civilians as leverage to force her into demonstrating capabilities that officially didn't exist. Agent Morrison's final briefing confirmed Rebecca's analysis of the situation. This was a targeted operation designed to expose your identity and eliminate your civilian cover, he reported. Intelligence suggests it was conducted by individuals who want you returned to active military service, whether voluntarily or otherwise. Rebecca's transformation from neighborhood coffee shop owner to revealed military specialist was complete, but the implications would affect every relationship and community connection she'd built over 3 years of careful integration into civilian life. Her hidden expertise had saved lives, but the cost was the destruction of everything she'd worked to create and protect. The smoke had barely settled over downtown Portland when Rebecca Chun found herself in the unprecedented position of explaining 8 years of classified military service to the civilian community that had been her chosen family for 3 years. The federal debriefing tent that had been erected in Pioneer Courthouse Square served as the backdrop for conversations that would reshape every relationship she'd built since leaving active duty. Thomas Brennan sat across from Rebecca in the emergency command center, his weathered hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. The elderly man who had shared morning conversations about weather and neighborhood gossip was now processing the reality that his friend possessed expertise in controlled demolitions and tactical operations that had saved hundreds of lives. Captain Rebecca Chun, former specialist in urban demolitions and structural warfare, Thomas repeated slowly, as if testing how the words felt. For 3 years, I've been sharing coffee with someone who could level a city block if she wanted to. That's something to process. Rebecca's response carried the weight of someone who had dreaded this moment for years while knowing it was inevitable. I never wanted to deceive you, Thomas. When I left military service, I just wanted to be someone who made good coffee and contributed to a community. The demolitions work, the tactical training, that was supposed to stay buried in classified files that nobody would ever access. The revelation of Rebecca's true background had created ripple effects throughout the neighborhood that extended far beyond simple shock at discovering hidden capabilities. Federal authorities were now conducting comprehensive interviews with everyone who had known her, treating her civilian relationships as potential security assets or intelligence sources that required official evaluation. Jennifer Walsh emerged from her own federal interview with a mixture of understanding and hurt that reflected the complex emotions many community members were experiencing. Her medical training had prepared her to recognize trauma and crisis response, but discovering that someone she'd trusted had been concealing military expertise in explosive ordnance disposal created questions about the authenticity of their friendship. I keep thinking about all the times you helped people with medical emergencies, Jennifer said quietly. Your knowledge wasn't just from first aid courses, was it? You had real medical training from military combat operations. When you saved Harold Morrison, you were drawing on experience treating battlefield casualties, not civilian health emergencies. Rebecca's acknowledgement of her military medical training opened discussions about how extensively her civilian persona had been constructed around partial truths and carefully omitted details. Her expertise in emergency medicine, crisis management, and tactical leadership had been genuine contributions to community welfare, but they had also been manifestations of capabilities developed for warfare. Kevin Nakamura's analytical approach to processing Rebecca's revelation had led him to conduct his own investigation into the federal operation that had been monitoring her activities. His software development background had provided tools for understanding the electronic surveillance network that had been documenting her every movement and conversation for months. The surveillance operation was comprehensive, Kevin reported during one of the community meetings that had been organized to address the aftermath of the building collapse. They had detailed intelligence about your military service record, your transition to civilian life, and your integration into our neighborhood. This wasn't routine background monitoring. Someone had been planning this revelation for a long time. The discovery that Rebecca's civilian life had been under systematic observation for months created additional layers of violation and betrayal that community members were struggling to process. Their friendship with her had been genuine, but it had also been documented and analyzed by federal authorities, who viewed their relationships as intelligence sources rather than human connections. Maria Santos had initially felt anger at Rebecca's deception about her background, but her business experience had helped her understand the practical realities of someone with classified military experience trying to build a normal life. The marketing firm owner had spent the past week researching veteran transition programs and the challenges faced by individuals leaving specialized military roles. "I've been reading about military to civilian transitions," Maria explained during a private conversation with Rebecca. "People with your background face unique challenges because your skills don't translate easily to civilian employment, and your service record can't be shared with potential employers or community members. I'm beginning to understand why you constructed the identity you did." Rebecca's gratitude for Maria's research and understanding provided one of the few positive responses she'd received from community members who were processing the revelation of her true background. The support offered hope that some relationships might survive the destruction of her cover identity, though she understood that many people would never be able to reconcile the person they'd known with the military specialist she'd been revealed to be. Dr. Helen Chang had approached Rebecca's situation from an engineering perspective, analyzing the technical expertise she demonstrated during the building collapse and comparing it to the most advanced demolitions training available in military circles. Her professional assessment had confirmed that Rebecca possessed knowledge that was restricted to the highest levels of specialized military education. "Your understanding of controlled demolitions and structural failure analysis exceeds what most civilian engineers learn in graduate school," Dr. Chang reported. "The precision of your evacuation coordination and your ability to predict collapse patterns indicates training that's only available to military specialists in urban warfare and explosive ordnance disposal. This wasn't basic military engineering. You were trained for highly classified operations." The technical validation of Rebecca's expertise had helped some community members understand the magnitude of capabilities she'd been concealing, while also raising questions about what other classified knowledge she possessed that hadn't been revealed during the building collapse emergency. Her demonstration of demolition expertise suggested additional skills that remained hidden beneath her civilian identity. Alex Rivera had been struggling with the federal pressure to provide ongoing intelligence about Rebecca's activities and behavior patterns. The environmental science student's loyalty to his employer conflicted with official demands for cooperation that carried legal consequences if he refused to comply with federal authority. "They want me to continue reporting on your daily activities and any conversations that might reveal additional information about your military background," Alex explained during a private meeting in the debris-filled cafe. I told them I wouldn't spy on someone who's been a good employer and community member, but they said my cooperation isn't optional if I want to avoid legal problems. Rebecca's response to Alex's situation demonstrated the protective instincts that had motivated her: civilian community involvement. Her primary concern was ensuring that innocent people who had become associated with her didn't suffer consequences for relationships they'd entered without knowledge of her classified background. "You should cooperate with their requests," Rebecca told Alex. "My military service record is no longer secret, and protecting you from federal retaliation is more important than whatever privacy I might have left. Just remember that you never did anything wrong by working here or being my friend." Zoe Patterson's artistic sensibilities had provided unique insights into how Rebecca's revelation was affecting the broader community beyond their immediate circle of regular customers. Her work at Portland State had connected her with other students and faculty who were processing the news that a neighborhood business owner had turned out to be a military demolitions specialist. "People are fascinated and scared at the same time," Zoe reported. "Some think it's amazing that someone with your background was contributing to civilian community life. Others are worried about what it means to have military specialists living among civilians without anyone knowing about their capabilities. The art community is divided about whether your deception was protective or predatory." The broader community response to Rebecca's revelation reflected complex attitudes about military service, civilian veteran integration, and the ethics of concealed identities that had been necessitated by classified service records. Public opinion ranged from admiration for her community contributions to concern about the implications of hidden military expertise in civilian populations. Officer Jamie Torres had been reassigned to work directly with federal authorities, investigating Rebecca's background and civilian activities. Her law enforcement perspective provided professional analysis of the security implications while maintaining personal support for someone who had contributed positively to community safety. "Federal agents are treating your civilian life as a comprehensive security assessment," Torres explained. "Every relationship, every business decision, every community interaction is being analyzed for potential intelligence value or security risk. They're not just investigating your past, they're evaluating whether your civilian identity represented genuine transition or operational cover." The federal scrutiny of Rebecca's civilian life had extended to every person, business, and organization she'd interacted with during 3 years of community integration. Bank records, business transactions, customer relationships, and personal activities were being examined for patterns that might reveal operational purposes or security concerns. Detective Williams had been working with federal authorities to understand the scope of the investigation while protecting community members who had become unwilling participants in classified security matters. His experience with complex investigations had helped him navigate the federal requirements while maintaining relationships with civilians who were struggling to process the situation. "The federal investigation is comprehensive and ongoing," Detective Williams reported during a community meeting. "Rebecca's military background and civilian activities are being analyzed at the highest levels of government security agencies." The building collapse incident was apparently designed to test her capabilities and confirm intelligence about her specialized training. The revelation that the building collapse had been an engineered test of Rebecca's abilities created additional anger and fear among community members who realized they had been used as unwitting participants in a federal operation. Their neighborhood had become a testing ground for assessing military capabilities, with their lives placed at risk to evaluate classified expertise. Fire Chief Martinez had submitted detailed reports about Rebecca's performance during the emergency response, documenting her tactical leadership and technical expertise, while recommending that her capabilities be recognized for their contribution to civilian safety. His professional assessment had provided official validation of her community value despite the controversy surrounding her concealed identity. Her demolition expertise and tactical coordination saved over 200 lives during the building collapse, Chief Martinez stated in his official report. Regardless of questions about her concealed military background, her actions during the emergency demonstrated exceptional professional competence and commitment to civilian safety that deserve recognition rather than punishment. The emergency services endorsement of Rebecca's actions had provided some positive balance to the community reaction, though it couldn't address the fundamental questions about trust and authenticity that her revelation had created. Her technical expertise was unquestionable, but the ethics of concealed military capabilities remained controversial, standing in her damaged cafe, while federal authorities continued their investigation and community members processed the destruction of everything they'd believed about her identity. Rebecca faced the reality that her experiment in civilian life had ended permanently. The relationships she'd built and the community she'd served would never view her the same way, regardless of their individual decisions about forgiveness or continued association. The transformation from neighborhood coffee shop owner to revealed military specialist had been completed, but the human cost extended far beyond her personal situation to include everyone who had trusted her friendship and contributed to the civilian identity that had now been destroyed by forces beyond her control. 3 years of careful community integration had been erased in 90 seconds of emergency response, proving that some aspects of military service could never be truly left behind. No matter how deeply someone tried to bury them beneath layers of civilian normalcy and peaceful contribution to community welfare. 6 months after the Cascade building collapse that shattered her civilian cover, Rebecca Chun stood behind the rebuilt counter of Grind Coffee Collective, serving morning coffee to customers who now approached her with a complex mixture of respect, curiosity, and carefully maintained normalcy. The federal investigation had concluded with official recognition of her heroic actions, while classified debriefings had revealed that the building collapse was orchestrated by a rogue defense contractor seeking to demonstrate the value of embedded military specialists in civilian infrastructure protection. The reconstruction of her cafe had been funded through a combination of insurance settlements, federal assistance, and community fundraising that reflected the neighborhood's ultimate decision to embrace rather than reject someone whose hidden expertise had saved hundreds of lives. The new interior maintained the warm, welcoming atmosphere Rebecca had originally created, but now included subtle acknowledgments of her military background that honored her service while respecting her civilian identity. Thomas Brennan had become Rebecca's most vocal advocate during the months of community healing that followed her revelation. The retired principal's morning routine remained unchanged, but their conversations now included open discussions about military service, veteran transition challenges, and the complex ethics of classified expertise in civilian communities. "I've had 6 months to think about our friendship," Thomas said during one of their morning conversations. "The person who remembered my coffee order and listened to stories about my grandchildren was real. The expertise that saved all those lives was real too. I decided that having both aspects in one person makes you more remarkable, not less trustworthy." Rebecca's gratitude for Thomas's acceptance had become a foundation for rebuilding relationships with other community members who had chosen understanding over resentment. His public support had influenced others to reconsider their initial reactions to her concealed military background. Jennifer Walsh had returned to her regular coffee routine after taking several weeks to process the revelation that Rebecca's medical knowledge came from treating combat casualties rather than civilian first aid training. Her nursing background had ultimately helped her appreciate the life-saving skills that military medical training had provided to their community. "I kept thinking about all the times you helped people with medical emergencies," Jennifer reflected. Harold Morrison, the construction worker who was injured last year, that college student who had the allergic reaction, Your military medical training probably saved their lives, even though we didn't know where your expertise came from. I decided the source of your knowledge matters less than how you used it to help people. The integration of Rebecca's military background with her civilian identity had created opportunities for her to contribute to community safety in ways that honored both aspects of her experience. She had begun teaching first aid and emergency preparedness classes that drew on her military medical training while serving civilian community education needs. Kevin Nakamura had channeled his analytical skills into researching veteran transition programs and civilian military integration challenges. His software development background had led him to create digital resources that helped other veterans navigate the complex process of adapting specialized military skills to civilian community service. Your situation made me realize how many veterans face similar challenges adapting their military expertise to civilian life, Kevin explained during one of their regular conversations. I've been working with veteran service organizations to develop better resources for people with classified backgrounds who want to contribute to civilian communities without compromising operational security. Rebecca's story had become a case study in successful veteran integration that balanced personal fulfillment with community contribution. Kevin's research had connected her with other former military specialists who were navigating similar transitions. From classified service to civilian leadership roles, Maria Santos had transformed her initial feelings of betrayal into business opportunities that supported veteran-owned enterprises and civilian military partnership initiatives. Her marketing expertise had helped Rebecca develop community programs that utilized military training for civilian safety education while maintaining appropriate boundaries around classified information. The business community has embraced the idea of having someone with your background as a neighborhood resource, Maria reported. Your emergency preparedness consulting has helped dozens of local businesses improve their crisis management capabilities. People value your expertise now that they understand where it came from and how it benefits everyone. Rebecca's emergency preparedness consulting had evolved into a legitimate business that complemented her cafe operations while providing valuable community services. Her military training in crisis management and tactical planning had been adapted to serve civilian emergency preparedness needs without compromising classified methodologies. Dr. Helen Chong had collaborated with Rebecca on developing improved building safety protocols that incorporated military-grade structural analysis techniques into civilian engineering practices. Their partnership had created innovations in emergency evacuation procedures and structural failure prediction that were being adopted by engineering firms throughout the Pacific Northwest. Your military demolitions training provides perspectives on structural vulnerability that civilian engineers rarely consider, Dr. Chang explained. Our collaboration has resulted in safety improvements that could prevent building collapses and save lives in future emergencies. Your expertise is being used to protect people rather than endanger them. The professional validation of Rebecca's military skills had helped community members understand that her capabilities represented valuable resources rather than hidden threats. Her knowledge was being applied to civilian protection and community safety rather than warfare or destruction. Alex Rivera had completed his environmental science degree and accepted a position with the Portland Emergency Management Office, where he worked directly with Rebecca on developing community resilience programs that integrated military tactical planning with civilian emergency preparedness. His experience working for someone with a classified military background had prepared him for career opportunities in emergency management and disaster response. Working for you taught me more about crisis management and emergency coordination than any of my college courses, Alex reflected. Your approach to problem solving and tactical thinking has shaped how I approach emergency planning in my professional career. The federal pressure to inform you was difficult, but it led me to understand the complexity of civilian-military integration and veteran transition challenges. Rebecca's mentorship of Alex had demonstrated how military expertise could be transferred to civilian emergency management professionals without compromising classified information or operational security. His career success reflected the positive impact that veteran knowledge could have on civilian institutional capabilities. Zoe Patterson had channeled her artistic talents into creating community art projects that honored veteran service while celebrating civilian-military integration. Her work had helped neighborhood residents process the complex emotions surrounding Rebecca's revelation while fostering broader discussions about veteran contributions to civilian communities. The art community initially struggled with questions about deception and authenticity, Zoe explained. But creating collaborative projects that explore themes of service, sacrifice, and community contribution has helped people understand that your military background and civilian identity were both authentic aspects of who you are. Rebecca's integration into the local arts community had provided creative outlets for processing her transition from classified military service to civilian leadership while contributing to cultural enrichment that served broader community needs. Officer Jamie Torres had been promoted to sergeant and assigned to coordinate community policing initiatives that incorporated veteran expertise into civilian law enforcement programs. Her professional relationship with Rebecca had evolved into collaboration on training programs that helped police officers understand military veteran perspectives and capabilities. Your situation helped our department develop better policies for working with veterans who have specialized military backgrounds, Sergeant Torres reported. We've created programs that utilize veteran expertise for community safety while respecting the privacy and transition needs of former military personnel who are building civilian lives. The law enforcement recognition of Rebecca's community contributions had provided official validation of her civilian integration, while establishing precedents for other veterans with classified backgrounds who were seeking to contribute to civilian public safety initiatives. Detective Williams had incorporated lessons learned from Rebecca's case into training programs for investigators, working with veterans who had classified military service records. His experience navigating the federal investigation while protecting community relationships had created protocols for handling similar situations with greater sensitivity to civilian-military integration challenges. Rebecca's case taught us that veterans with classified backgrounds face unique challenges that require specialized understanding from law enforcement. Detective Williams explained, "We've developed better procedures for supporting veteran transition to civilian life, while maintaining appropriate security protocols when classified expertise becomes relevant to civilian situations." The Portland Police Bureau had adopted new policies for working with military veterans that balance security requirements with support for successful civilian integration, using Rebecca's situation as a model for constructive engagement rather than adversarial investigation. Fire Chief Martinez had implemented training programs that incorporated military tactical planning into civilian emergency response procedures. Rebecca's performance during the building collapse had demonstrated the value of military expertise in civilian emergency management, leading to systematic integration of veteran knowledge into firefighter training and emergency preparedness planning. Your tactical coordination during the building collapse changed how we approach large-scale emergency response, Chief Martinez acknowledged. We've integrated military-style command and control procedures into our standard operating procedures, and we're actively recruiting veterans with emergency management experience to enhance our capabilities. The fire department's adoption of military emergency management techniques had improved their response effectiveness while providing career opportunities for veterans transitioning to civilian emergency services. Rebecca's expertise had catalyzed institutional changes that benefited both veteran employment and civilian safety. Agent Morrison had concluded his investigation with recommendations that Rebecca's case be used as a model for successful civilian integration of personnel with classified military backgrounds. His final report had praised her community contributions, while acknowledging the challenges faced by veterans whose service records couldn't be fully disclosed to civilian employers or community members. Captain Chun's successful integration into civilian community leadership while maintaining operational security demonstrates that classified military expertise can be adapted to serve civilian purposes without compromising national security, Morrison's report concluded. Her case provides a framework for supporting other veterans with similar backgrounds who seek to contribute to civilian communities while respecting classification requirements. The federal recognition of Rebecca's successful transition had established precedents for other veterans with classified backgrounds who were navigating similar challenges in adapting military expertise to civilian community service roles. The seasonal changes that had once marked routine business cycles now carried additional significance as Rebecca reflected on how completely her life had been transformed by forces beyond her control. The autumn morning that had begun with routine coffee service and ended with building collapse and identity revelation had become a dividing line between her hidden military past and her integrated civilian military present. Standing behind her familiar counter as another day of community service began, Rebecca understood that her experiment in concealed civilian identity had evolved into something more authentic and sustainable. The relationship she'd built while hiding her military background had been tested and strengthened by the revelation of her true capabilities, proving that genuine connections could survive even the most dramatic revelations about hidden aspects of personal history. Her morning routine now included open acknowledgement of skills that had once been carefully concealed. As customers sought advice about emergency preparedness, crisis management, and community safety issues that drew on her military expertise, the knowledge that had once been restricted to classified operations was now being used to enhance civilian security and community resilience. "Good morning, Captain Chun," Thomas said with a smile that carried 3 years of friendship plus 6 months of deeper understanding. "Beautiful day for saving the world, one cup of coffee at a time." Rebecca's response reflected the integration of military service with civilian purpose that had become her new identity. "Every day is an opportunity to serve, Thomas. The mission changes, but the commitment to protecting and serving the community remains the same." The transformation from hidden military specialist to acknowledged community leader had required sacrificing the anonymity she'd initially sought, but it had provided something more valuable: the opportunity to use her complete range of capabilities in service of people and purposes she genuinely cared about. Her story had become neighborhood legend, but more importantly, it had become a model for how specialized military expertise could be adapted to serve civilian community needs while honoring both military service and civilian values. The skills developed for warfare had found new expression in community building, emergency preparedness, and civilian protection that reflected the highest ideals of both military service and civilian contribution. Standing in her rebuilt cafe, surrounded by relationships that had survived the revelation of her hidden identity, Rebecca had discovered that authenticity required not the concealment of military expertise, but its integration with civilian values in service of community welfare and human flourishing. The Portland Veterans Affairs Office had approached Rebecca about developing a comprehensive transition program for military personnel with classified backgrounds who were seeking civilian careers. Her unique experience navigating the challenges of concealed military expertise while building authentic community relationships had created a blueprint that could help other veterans avoid the isolation and identity conflicts she had experienced. "We've identified over 300 veterans in the Pacific Northwest who have specialized military training that doesn't translate easily to civilian employment," explained Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the VA's Regional Transition Coordinator. "Your Successful integration while maintaining operational security provides a model we want to replicate for others facing similar challenges. Rebecca's collaboration with the Veterans Affairs Office had expanded beyond individual consulting to include policy development that could influence how military personnel with classified backgrounds were supported during their transition to civilian life. Her insights about the psychological challenges of concealed identity and the importance of authentic community connection were being incorporated into national veteran transition programs. The Department of Defense had quietly approached Rebecca about consulting on civilian integration strategies for retiring special operations personnel. Her experience demonstrated that military expertise could be successfully adapted to serve civilian community needs without compromising national security or operational effectiveness. The military is recognizing that successful veteran transition requires more than job placement, Rebecca explained to a gathering of veteran service organizations. Personnel with specialized training need frameworks for adapting their expertise to civilian purposes while maintaining the sense of mission and service that defined their military careers. Rebecca's consulting work had connected her with veterans across the country who were struggling to adapt military skills to civilian applications. Her cafe had become an informal headquarters for a growing network of former military specialists who were finding ways to serve civilian communities while honoring their classified service commitments. The success of her emergency preparedness programs had attracted attention from FEMA and the Department of Homeland Security, who were interested in systematically incorporating military tactical planning into civilian disaster response capabilities. Rebecca's demonstration that military crisis management skills could enhance civilian emergency preparedness without revealing classified methodologies had opened new avenues for veteran contribution to national resilience. Your work has shown that military tactical expertise can be declassified and adapted for civilian emergency management without compromising operational security, observed Colonel James Patterson, who had been assigned to evaluate civilian applications of military crisis management techniques. The programs you've developed could be replicated in communities across the country to improve disaster preparedness and emergency response capabilities. The recognition from military leadership had validated Rebecca's approach to civilian integration, while creating opportunities for other veterans to contribute their specialized knowledge to civilian community safety initiatives. Her success had become a case study in constructive military-civilian collaboration that served both veteran transition needs and civilian security requirements. Portland State University had offered Rebecca an adjunct faculty position, teaching emergency management and crisis leadership courses that drew on her military experience while serving civilian education needs. Her classroom discussions about tactical decision-making, resource coordination, and personnel management under extreme pressure provided students with insights that traditional academic programs couldn't offer. Teaching allows me to share military expertise in an educational context that serves civilian professional development while honoring the classified nature of my specific operational experience, Rebecca explained to her first class of emergency management students. The principles of tactical planning and crisis coordination that I learned in military service have applications in civilian emergency management, disaster response, and community resilience that can benefit everyone. Her academic appointment had provided a legitimate framework for sharing military knowledge while maintaining appropriate boundaries around classified information. Students from diverse backgrounds were learning tactical thinking and crisis management skills that would enhance their civilian careers in emergency services, disaster response, and community safety. The Oregon National Guard had invited Rebecca to serve as a civilian advisor for their community outreach programs, helping to bridge the gap between military capabilities and civilian emergency preparedness needs. Her unique perspective as someone who had successfully integrated military expertise with civilian community leadership made her an ideal liaison for improving civilian-military cooperation. The National Guard's mission includes both military readiness and civilian emergency support, explained General Patricia Rodriguez, the Oregon National Guard commander. Rebecca's experience demonstrates how military training can be adapted to serve civilian community needs while maintaining operational effectiveness and security requirements. Rebecca's work with the National Guard had focused on developing joint training exercises that improved both military readiness and civilian emergency response capabilities. Her programs had created opportunities for military personnel to practice their skills in civilian contexts while helping civilian emergency responders learn from military tactical expertise. The insurance industry had begun consulting with Rebecca about risk assessment and disaster preparedness strategies that incorporated military-grade threat analysis into civilian business continuity planning. Her expertise in structural vulnerability assessment and emergency evacuation procedures had applications in commercial and residential safety that could prevent casualties and reduce property damage. Military threat assessment techniques provide perspectives on risk management that civilian insurance practices rarely consider, explained David Chun, a risk assessment specialist who had begun incorporating Rebecca's methodologies into his professional practice. Her approach to analyzing vulnerabilities and developing contingency plans has improved our ability to help clients prepare for various emergency scenarios. The commercial applications of Rebecca's military expertise had created additional revenue streams while demonstrating that specialized military knowledge could serve civilian economic interests as well as community safety needs. Her consulting work was helping businesses develop more comprehensive emergency preparedness while creating sustainable income that supported her community service activities. Rebecca's relationship with her employees had evolved to include mentorship that drew on her military leadership experience while respecting their civilian career goals. Alex's success in emergency management and Zoe's artistic exploration of veteran themes had demonstrated how exposure to military perspectives could enhance civilian professional development. Working for Rebecca taught me leadership principles and crisis management skills that I never would have learned in a traditional business environment, Alex reflected during a staff appreciation event. Her military background provided training in tactical thinking and decision-making under pressure that has been invaluable in my emergency management career. The positive impact of Rebecca's leadership style on her employees had attracted attention from business schools interested in studying how military leadership principles could be adapted to civilian management practices. Her cafe had become a case study in veteran entrepreneurship and civilian military workplace integration. The neighborhood association had elected Rebecca to serve as vice president of community safety, a position that formally recognized her expertise while providing opportunities to contribute to local security initiatives. Her military background was now viewed as a valuable community asset rather than a source of concern or suspicion. Having someone with Rebecca's background involved in community leadership makes all of us feel more secure, explained Neighborhood Association President Carol Martinez. Her expertise in emergency preparedness and crisis management has improved our ability to respond to various challenges while maintaining the peaceful, family-friendly atmosphere that makes this neighborhood special. Rebecca's formal community leadership role had provided legitimate channels for utilizing her military expertise in civilian governance, while demonstrating that veterans could contribute to civilian democratic processes in ways that enhanced, rather than threatened, community autonomy and safety. The morning light filtering through Portland's persistent drizzle carried promises of continued service in new forms. As Rebecca had learned that true strength lay not in hiding her military capabilities, but in choosing how to apply them in service of values that honored both her oath to defend and her commitment to the civilian community that had become her Chosen family. Standing behind her familiar counter while planning another day of community service that seamlessly integrated military expertise with civilian values. Rebecca embodied the possibility that specialized military training could find meaningful expression in peaceful purposes, proving that the transition from warrior to community leader was not just possible, but essential for both veteran fulfillment and civilian security in an interconnected world where the skills of protection could serve the highest aspirations of human community and democratic society. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.